there's a lot of takeaways I've had from this experience. I've been to film
Yeah, go
festivals
ahead.
before. I've been to Heartland Film Festival, been to Cordillera, I've been to smaller film festivals, but I've never been to a big time proper film festival, which this definitely is. Of course, it's not as big as Sundance or Cannes, or maybe it's probably about the same size as South by Southwest. It's a very big Canadian festival. It's probably the second biggest after TIFF. So there's been a lot of really good learning experiences. I've been going to a lot of the talks, which is really incredible because I've met just some like really big name distributors and producers and filmmakers. I was lucky enough to see a couple of films. I saw an early showing of The Last Showgirl, which opened the festival with an introduction by Pamela Anderson, which has some really fantastic moments to it. It's a very raw film and it's kind of all over the place. Great performances by Dave Bautista and Jamie Lee Curtis. And it's just kind of a film that really pulls at you, right? It really hurts. It's kind of very raw. And there's just a lot of stuff that's like very soft and out of focus. And it's a very disorienting film. And I think that was a great way to start this whole experience because it has been a very disorienting experience. I mean, just meeting a lot of different filmmakers of all different talents. I mean, it's crazy. Some of these people here are film students and they're just starting out in the film industry. And then you have other people who are like, yeah, I've been working in the industry for 40 plus years. I'm definitely jealous of Canadians because, well, for a lot of reasons. I mean, government, healthcare, but they're incredible and amazing access to tax credits. So the thing about Canadians is they have the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcast Channel, and they have a lot of different funds, which they've been talking a lot about. They've been talking a lot about policy, which I guess isn't necessarily that applicable as an American, but it's still very interesting to hear. As a filmmaker, you can basically at any point just send in an application and be like, I want to make this movie, and the Canadian government will just give you money to make it. And sometimes it's only like five, 10, $15,000. But to have access to that, I mean, when we went to watch the short films work, especially when we were premiering the film that I produced for sale, after every film other than ours, because there's a bunch of short films, there's like seven different grants funded by it, right? Here's this Canadian grant, that Canadian grant, that Canadian grant. And so, I told Steven this may not be the strongest film in here. I mean, one of them was, do you know that Indeed Rising Voices thing? Like if you're going to the movie theater and see like before the film starts, right? They do the Indeed Rising
Yeah.
Voices. One of the films is an Indeed Rising Voices. And so like, right, that film had $250,000 budget. And it's a beautiful film. It's called Fire Lane. Really wonderful, great storytelling. They definitely use that $250,000 to the max. It's a story about, and this is close to home, I guess, as someone who lives very close to California, right? It's about incarcerated people who are forced to work in Cal Fire and are paid 12 cents an hour, something absurdly
Yeah.
small, right? It's indentured servants, basically. I mean, it's about as
It's
close to
slavery.
slavery. It's slavery.
Yeah.
It is, right?
Yeah.
It's modern slavery, and
Yeah.
right, and not just slavery, but like putting them in the most dangerous positions because that's what they do with the prisoners, right? They put them in the most dangerous situations because it's too dangerous for the firefighters to go. So we send prisoners that we don't care about, and it's a really touching story, an amazing story, and there's a lot of great shorts like this. I mean, a couple of them were actually shot on Kodak. They're traveling all over the world. One of them was shot in Indonesia. One is shot in Venice. And most of these films, I mean, we're talking 10, 15, 50, $100,000, even $200,000 in this short film. And Steven's film, we shot in a shoestring budget. And I mean, a proper shoestring budget where we spent less than $1,000 on the entire film. And
Mhm.
I told him it's not as polished. And maybe in some degrees it's not as good as some of these films, but you should be really proud that despite the fact having so much less than everyone else here, right? Despite the fact that we're the only American film in that showcase. So despite the fact we're the only one that didn't have access to all of these funds, we're still able to make an incredible film. That's something to be proud of because you don't want it to be the case. And they keep talking about this in the film festival, how money doesn't really matter, but that's kind of bullshit. Money does play a role in making a film. Yeah, money doesn't matter so much anymore from the standpoint of equipment because you can shoot on an iPhone and honestly, it's going to look fine. You don't need expensive equipment anymore. You can spend very little money on equipment. We live in that world now. But the fact is that money will still buy you talent. That's just how it is. If you have money, you can afford a better DP, you can afford a better gaffer, right? You can have just better actors and a better community of people working on the film. Even though everyone on our sets loves what they do, and they're really great at it. But everyone who works on our sets, they're hobbyists, right? They're not professional
Mhm.
filmmakers. They don't do this for a living. And so there is just that difference. And so I was very proud and honored to be part of this community and to show this film, even though it's not my film, but just to be participating in something where we don't have the funds that a lot of these other filmmakers, we don't have access to these things that these other filmmakers have. And so I was just very grateful to be part of that experience. And I've met a lot of really amazing people, met some really great distributors, right? Talking about the film that I'm making. Steven actually just texted me last night that he had some big news. The one frustrating thing is there is a lot of rhetoric that I'm not a huge fan of, which is the people sitting up there on the stage talk about how, oh, you don't need to cater your film to anybody. You should just make your best work. Like that's all we're looking for, which is bullshit. You know, the head of Netflix is there, head of Paramount's there, head of these like major networks. They're like, oh no, you just make quality content and then they'll find a market. And I'm like, that's bullshit. And it pisses me off that you try to convince all of these people here that the only thing they knew is make good work. Because as we both know, there's plenty of great work that is never found, right?
Right.
That
Yeah.
lives forever. And I think that is just a really frustrating advice. And I will say the better talks, they don't really say that as much. I mean, sometimes they'll start with that kind of rhetoric because I think you're just, and we are in Canada, so most of them are Canadians. So there is this sort of gentleness that comes to Canadians that maybe it's a little more brass in the US. And I will say, like, the few US talkers that have been on these panels definitely are a little more straightforward, right? The ones from like Los Angeles and the like are like, no, no, no. It's not the best work that gets made because that's just not how it is. That's not how this industry works. That's never how this industry works. I think one of the most valuable things, they're like, honestly, fame and
Mhm.
names go a long way. For better or worse, the fact is that when I was listening to the distributors talk, which I think was my favorite talk, when we decide what films we're going to pick up to show in theaters, a distributor is kind of a weird job in film. So a distributor isn't, they don't produce the film, right? They're not paying for the film to be made. Typically, they don't come into the place until the film's already made. But a distributor is the person who gets the movie from film festivals to theaters or they sell it to streaming services, right? So they're this weird middleman. And the big thing that the distributors talked about is we're honestly looking for who is it that we're going to sell this to. And if there isn't a market to sell this to, like, we're not going to buy your film. The distributors are the people that I'm most interested in because that's kind of the world that I'm familiar with. For running a movie theater, I've worked with a lot of distributors before. Some of these companies, I met some of these people before, and I had to go to these stupid networking things, which I fucking hate networking. It's my least favorite part of the conference, but like it's the thing everyone wants to go to. And one of the filmmakers that we met, he's a great filmmaker. He teaches in Vancouver. He's like a college film professor. And everyone's here to meet the big producer. It's like, well, if everyone's here to meet that person isn't there, right? We're all just kind of running in circles. The networking thing isn't my thing. It's not really what I'm interested in. I'm much more
Mhm.
interested in going to the talks and, you know, actually listening to the people who work in this business. Fucking producer Virgin River was here, right? And he talks about, you know, here's the process of how I make it, right? The technical stuff. Like that's the stuff I'm interested in. That's why I'm here. And that's how I've been experiencing this festival. And I'll admit that I haven't seen very many movies. I've only seen one film since I've been here. I haven't seen any of the other films. I've seen a lot of talks. People talk about their films and talk about all incredible work they're doing. But I don't know. When it comes to film festivals, sometimes even when I'm here, I feel a little bitter about the whole experience because there's so many great storytellers here and they think like this is the thing that's going to get them their start. This is the thing that's going to get them ahead. And there does seem to be this idea from the people at the top, for whatever reason, perpetuating this idea of, oh, you just need to meet the right person. You just need to do this. I find that a little cruel and a little torturing and maybe a bit condescending because the fact is that all the people at the top, right, pretty much everyone on these panels, they're all in their 50s or 60s or 70s. And so they just, very few of the talks have been from people who have gotten to the industry at a time that is now, which they've all made the point that like the industry is just different now than it's ever been. I went to a talk with Kobe Smulders, who is most famous for How I Met Your Mother. She's in like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Avengers and all that kind of stuff. And she talks about when she moved to LA, she was 22 years old. She says, I stayed in LA for 3 months and there were 140 pilot episodes being auditioned that season. 140. And she says this year there were seven. It's a very different world than the one that all the people up top are talking about. Questions asked a lot is, how'd you get into the industry? And they're like, oh yeah, I was a grip, and then I worked my way up into a line producer, and now I'm like the head of Netflix. That's not how it works anymore. That's not how the industry works. That's not how any of these things works. And it's frustrating that you try to sell us the idea that it is. And I'm really happy. Whatever Steven's news is, I'm really happy that something's moving in the right direction. But I've expressed this opinion before, is that shorts are bullshit, and they've all made that very clear over the course of these past 5 days. Is the fact is that shorts don't take you anywhere. They don't. The only reason it would is if like you release a short that has 5 million views on YouTube, right? If you create a sensation, that's the only way a short takes you anywhere. They're like, honestly, we're looking for features. Like these film festivals are really a giant sales pitch, right? It's to sell either yourself or your film or your feature. And if you're not making a feature, right, for all of our filmmakers out there listening, if you're not making a feature and you want to make it in the quote unquote movie business, it's probably not going to happen. It's the only way to get into this system, be part of the system, if that is something that you want to do. And there are plenty of great filmmakers that make shorts and have fun doing it. And you can, I mean, because of things like YouTube, you can make a living from it. It may not be Hollywood's level $100 million, but if your like end goal is to be a big time Hollywood director, it can only come from features. And I think that is something that I've been trying to ingrain in Steven for a very long time since I've met him. And he's still convinced that he just needs to make the right short, and then it'll get to the right place, and everything will just work out because he's obsessed with Ari Aster. And he's like, well, Ari Aster, he made a short, and then that allowed him to make his feature. And so I was talking about him because he's talked about this so many times. And so I was asking him about it the other day. I was like, well, did you like the festival route? Did you go to a bunch of festivals and meet the right people? He's like, no, I didn't get into any festivals. I was like, well, that's weird. And I was like, where did you go to school? He's like, oh, he went to AFI. And I was like, oh, you mean he went to the American Film Institute, the most famous film school in the world? Yeah. If you go to AFI, you're set, right? Like you're gonna get into the industry if you go to AFI. And I tried to explain that to him, and he still kind of didn't grab onto that. I think he's still set in his mindset. And you know what? I mean, hell, maybe he did find a producer that saw a short film and wants to make a feature with him. And I'm happy for him. And I would love if that's the case. And that's why we're up here. I had a couple opportunities to be interviewed by like the Whistler people. They're like, hey, do you want to talk about the film? And I'm like, no, no, no. This is his film. I'm just here to support him. I go to the stupid networking things because I know he wants to go to them, and so I'll hang out there with him. And then when like he goes and meets producers, I kind of step back, right? I have my own work that I'm doing, of course, and I am looking for
Mhm.
a distributor for More Beautiful Than Death, but I'm up here first and foremost to support him, and I am actively talking to distributors and stuff. And it's interesting because our two schedules don't really align because I'm a morning person, so I go to all the morning stuff, and then he doesn't really start going to stuff until like 2 or 3 in the afternoon. So he's definitely goes to the more like networking stuff, and I'm much more interested in the technical stuff. So I guess it ends up with a good balance. But yeah, the festival's been a really fun experience. Would I come back here again? I don't know. Unless I'm premiering a film, I don't really know if I want to go to a festival again. I mean, it was a cool experience and it's a big festival, but even if it was like Sundance or Cannes or TIFF, unless I'm premiering a film there, I don't know. It's
No,
not
film
necessarily.
festivals like no. Like film festivals like they're expensive to go to if you're just like going for fun. No, you should
Yeah.
only go to a film festival if you're being paid to go there, or
Yeah.
you have like some kind of like
Yeah.
economic incentive.
I mean, I am submitting my next film to Sundance, which meeting I think it
Hmm.
is valuable is like you meet the filmmakers who've gone to Sundance, who've gone to these big film festivals, and they're working in the
Hmm.
industry. It's like they are normal people. And I think that is encouraging, right? It's not like what they do is not unobtainable by any degree. And you even watch their films and you're like, that was all right. But you're not like blown away, right? It's not like a movie you're like, I could never make that. And so I think that part is really encouraging as a filmmaker, as someone who wants to show films in theaters and premiere at festivals and stuff like that. And so it is encouraging to know that this is available to everyone and everyone has the opportunity. And I think luck plays a bigger role than anyone wants to accept. I think that's the unfortunate reality of the world that we live in, is that luck does play a really big role. I mean, one of the filmmakers, she just made her first feature, and she's like, yeah, she's an influencer, and she's like, yeah, I gained a lot of followers on Instagram and TikTok and stuff. She's a stand-up comedian. And some rich guy from Silicon Valley contacted her company, and they're like, hey, we want to give money to the arts. Do you want to make a movie? She's like, yeah, sure. And that seems to be more the case than not for a lot of these filmmakers, is kind of hard work's involved. And I don't want to discredit the amount of work that all of these amazing filmmakers that are premiering their feature films, and a lot of beautiful films. It's definitely documentary heavy, a lot more documentary heavy than I expected, but some really incredible documentaries. And I mean, one of the documentarians, she's probably around our age, and she's been working on her documentary. This is her first feature film for 6 years. 6 years working on a documentary. I mean, can you imagine? Right, just working on one project for 6 years, having 6 years of footage. She gets over 17 terabytes of footage, and
Yeah.
having to go through that and decide what's going to be in this feature film. I mean, it's just absolutely insane. So it can be done for all of our listeners out
Yeah.
there. You can go out and make a feature film. You can go out, but I think you need to let go of the idea that you're going to get discovered. Every single talk that I went to, they're like, it doesn't happen. You don't get a call from Hollywood. The fact is, you just have to keep making work, and hopefully someone sees it. And they may not, but I don't think you can be latched on to that idea. And I certainly let go of that idea completely. I mean, would I love More Beautiful Than Death to premiere at Sundance and to go on to a bunch of big film festivals? Absolutely. Would I love it to premiere in movie theaters? More than anything in the world.
Mhm.
But I also accept the possibility that it could go nowhere. And that's fine too. I mean, Sir Mill Hayes, it's picked up by a bunch of like small streaming services since we first released it, but it hasn't made millions of dollars. It's not making money. But people see it, right? You go to our letterbox and there's reviews and people talk about it, and that's great. That's why we do what we do. And this podcast is definitely the same thing, where I'm just very grateful that anyone listens to the show. We just passed 500,000 views on our YouTube channel, which is a pretty big milestone. So I'm very grateful for all of
Yeah.
that.